Okay, this is exercise 4 for your sentence unit. This is on run-ons. Very common for if you are writing sentences, writing a paragraph, and maybe if you forget the proper punctuation or just aren't careful, all of a sudden instead of writing complete sentences, you might accidentally start writing run-ons. So we're going to correct these sentences. All of these sentences, these 5 here, are run-ons. We're going to talk about the different ways that you could correct them to make them a run-on. Okay? So look at this first one. All of us in class went together, comma. I sat next to Susan on the bus. Here I have 2 sentences that are joined together with a comma. All of us in class went together is a sentence, a complete sentence. It has a subject and a verb. It can make sense by itself. I sat next to Susan on the bus is a complete sentence. It has a subject and a verb. Makes sense by itself. This comma is not strong enough to separate those 2 sentences. I can correct this in a couple of different ways. I want you to write yours out here on this line, but just for our checking, I'm going to tell you what you could do. Okay? One thing you could do is after together, right here, you could write all of us went in class together, and you could put a period and do a capital I. I sat next to Susan on the bus. Another choice is instead of a comma, a semicolon is strong enough to separate the 2. So you could say, all of us went in class together, and then put a semicolon. I sat next to Susan on the bus. Your third choice is that you could make this comma strong enough to separate the 2 sentences by putting a fanboy after it. So you could say, all of us went together, comma, and then put the word and here, or another fanboy that makes sense. And I sat next to Susan on the bus. Either of those 3 choices would make number 1 correct. Number 2, a professor escorted us into an auditorium. People with different careers talked with us. It was fascinating. In this sentence, you have 3 sentences crammed together in this run-on sentence. The first one is, a professor escorted us into the auditorium. Let's put a period after auditorium. Okay? So if I have a period here, then I need to capitalize the first letter of my next word. So people with different careers talked with us. Let's put a period here, then capitalize it. It was fascinating. So that's one way you could make this non-run-on anymore and correct it, is by dividing it into 3 separate sentences. You could also combine any of the 2 sentences that are side by side with a comma and a conjunction. I could say something like, a professor escorted us into the auditorium, comma, and people with different careers talked with us, period. It was fascinating. The third thing you could do is you could use a semicolon. A professor escorted us into the auditorium, period. People with different careers talked with us, semicolon, it was fascinating. Okay, so you have 3 choices there. Number 3. Susan enjoyed the forest ranger's discussion. I was interested in the detective's lecture. Here I have 2 sentences crammed together. Right here, after discussion, is where I'm going to need to add some punctuation so that these are no longer a run-on. One thing I can do after discussion is I can put a period. And then, obviously, you would capitalize the word I after. Okay, that's one way to correct this. After discussion, I could put a semicolon. A semicolon is strong enough to divide 2 sentences. And then finish with, I was interested in the detective's lecture. I could also try a fanboy. So after discussion, I could put a comma with a fanboy, but, or and. Okay? Susan enjoyed the forest ranger's discussion, comma, but I was interested in the detective's lecture. That's also okay to do. Okay? Our fourth problem here, let's read it. One speaker planned the diet for the zoo animals. She brought a lion cub. She let us pet a chimpanzee. In this problem, you have 3 sentences crammed together in a run-on. So let's fix it. One speaker planned the diet for the zoo animals. Let's put a period after animals and capitalize she. She brought a lion cub, period, and then capitalize she. She let us pet a chimpanzee. That's one way to correct it. You could also use a comma and a fanboy at any of those after animals or after cub, or you could use a semicolon. One speaker planned the diet for zoo animals, semicolon, she brought a lion club, period. She let us pet a chimpanzee. So there's several different options there too. Okay, let's look at the last one. The banker received the most attention. Ursula asked him about his salary. The bank is good to its employees. Here I have 3 sentences together, all separated with commas. Well, a comma is not strong enough to separate sentences. So we need to use something stronger than a comma. So one thing you could do is instead of a comma, you could put a period. And just make sure that the next letter is capitalized. So that's one way you could do it. Sorry, that was fuzzy. Now it's cleared up. Another option is to do a comma and a fanboy. The banker received the most attention, comma, and Ursula asked him about a salary, period. The bank is good to its employees. You could do that if you wanted to. Or you could do a semicolon. The banker received the most attention, period. Ursula asked him about a salary, semicolon. The bank is good to its employees. So lots of different ways to do this. I want you to be comfortable with, figure out which way is the most comfortable for you as a writer. And don't be afraid to play around with it a little bit, but just make sure that you don't just use a comma by itself to separate sentences. It's not strong enough to separate a run-on. Please reflect. How many did you miss? And if you do or you don't understand.